Rain dripped from Marcus Washington's weathered face as he crouched behind a dumpster in the alley behind Corktown Warehouse. The 48-year-old former Navy SEAL commander had perfected the art of invisibility on Detroit's unforgiving streets. His military-issued jacket, now authentically worn and stained, hung loose on his deliberately thinned frame. His beard, carefully unkempt for 3 months, concealed the sharp jawline that had once commanded respect in briefing rooms across 3 continents. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. To anyone passing by, Marcus appeared to be just another homeless black man scavenging for bottles. Nobody looked twice at a vagrant, especially not one whose skin color made him even more invisible to polite society. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same prejudices that had haunted him throughout his military career now served as perfect operational camouflage. Through a pair of miniature binoculars concealed in a crumpled fast food bag, Marcus observed the loading dock of the warehouse. 3 black SUVs had arrived within the past hour, their occupants conducting themselves with the casual precision of professionals. Too casual for legitimate business, too organized for street-level criminals. Marcus had spent enough time tracking high-value targets to recognize a trafficking operation when he saw one. A young woman, maybe 19, stumbled from the back of the middle vehicle. Even from his position 50 yards away, Marcus could see she was drugged, her movements unsteady and confused. 2 men in expensive suits guided her toward the warehouse entrance with practiced efficiency. Marcus's jaw tightened as he photographed the scene with a camera hidden in his coat. Each click a silent promise of justice to come. His encrypted phone buzzed once, a message from Admiral James Mitchell at the Pentagon. Status report overdue, timeline acceleration authorized if necessary. Marcus deleted the message without responding. Mitchell meant well, but the Admiral had never worked the streets. Rushing this operation would get people killed, including the very victims they were trying to save. The sound of a police siren cut through the rain, growing closer. Marcus pocketed his equipment and moved deeper into the alley, adopting the shambling gait of someone with nowhere important to be. The patrol car rounded the corner, its spotlight sweeping across the alley entrance. "Well, well, what do we have here?" Officer Derek Thompson's voice carried the particular brand of contempt reserved for those he considered beneath human consideration. The 34-year-old cop emerged from his patrol car, hand resting casually on his weapon. His blonde hair was slicked back despite the rain, and his mirrored sunglasses reflected Marcus's deliberately slouched posture. Marcus had encountered Thompson twice before during his surveillance, always managing to fade away before direct contact. Today, escape wasn't an option without compromising his observation point. "Evening, officer," Marcus said, affecting the wearied tone of someone accustomed to harassment. "Just trying to stay dry." Thompson approached with predatory confidence. "ID, now." Marcus produced a well-crafted Homeless Services identification card, bearing the name Michael Washington, close enough to his real name to respond naturally, different enough to avoid federal database flags. Thompson examined it with exaggerated thoroughness, his free hand never leaving his weapon. "Michael Washington," Thompson read aloud, pronouncing each syllable with mocking precision. "Says you're a veteran. What branch, boy?" The racial slur hit its intended mark, but Marcus had endured worse from enemies and, shamefully, from fellow soldiers. "Navy, sir, 8 years. "Navy? Let me guess. Ship's cook? Janitor? I know you people didn't see any real action." Marcus bit back the instinctive response that would have detailed his service record. 3 combat deployments, 2 Bronze Stars, a Purple Heart, and command of SEAL Team 7 during operations that remained classified decades later. Instead, he nodded with what he hoped looked like embarrassment. "Something like that, officer." Thompson's expression shifted to professional cruelty. "Turn around. Hands on the wall. Time for a wellness check." The wellness check wasn't anything but. Thompson's hands roamed with unnecessary aggression, finding the hidden camera and phone despite Marcus's efforts to conceal them. The officer's technique was practiced. He'd done this many times before. Well, well, homeless veteran with expensive electronics. Where'd you steal these, Michael? Gifts from a church group, Marcus replied, the prepared cover story rolling easily off his tongue. They help veterans get back on their feet. Thompson's boot pressed into Marcus's ankle, a casual violence that spoke of countless similar encounters. You're lying to me, boy. I hate liars as much as I hate thieves. Before Thompson could escalate further, a voice cut through the rain-soaked alley. Officer, is there a problem here? Sarah Johnson emerged from the shadows like a force of nature. At 62, the former social worker carried herself with the unshakable dignity of someone who had spent decades fighting for the forgotten. Her graying hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her clothes, while worn, were clean and well-maintained. She pushed a shopping cart filled with blankets and supplies, making her evening rounds to check on the community's most vulnerable members. Thompson's demeanor shifted slightly in the presence of a witness, but his hostility remained. Just conducting a routine welfare check, ma'am. Nothing that concerns you. Michael's been staying in our area for months, Sarah said, her tone respectful but firm. He's no trouble to anyone, keeps to himself, helps where he can. Marcus felt a complex mix of gratitude and concern. Sarah's intervention could save him from immediate harassment, but it also drew attention to someone who couldn't afford it. Her protection of homeless individuals had already put her on the radar of people who prefer the vulnerable to remain invisible. Is that right? Thompson's smile was all teeth and no warmth. Well, Michael here was just telling me about his Navy service. Says he got these electronics from a church. Mighty generous church, wouldn't you say? Sarah's eyes met Marcus's briefly, and he saw intelligence there. She was filing away details, reading the situation with the practiced skill of someone who had spent decades navigating bureaucratic hostility. St. Vincent's has a program for veterans. They provide phones to help people stay connected with services. Michael, isn't that where you got yours? Marcus nodded, impressed despite himself by her quick thinking. Yes, ma'am. Sister Margaret. She runs the program. Thompson's expression darkened. He clearly wanted to escalate, but the presence of a witness with specific knowledge of local services complicated his position. After a long moment, he tossed the phone back to Marcus with deliberate force. You two better move along. This area's off limits after dark. City ordinance. And Michael, I'll be watching for you. Next time we chat, maybe we won't have company. As Thompson returned to his patrol car, Marcus caught Sarah's arm gently. Thank you. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, she replied simply. Around here, we look out for each other. That's how we survive. Marcus helped her push the cart toward the mouth of the alley, his trained eyes automatically scanning for threats while maintaining the appearance of grateful deference. As they walked, Sarah spoke quietly. That phone of yours, that's not from St. Vincent's, is it? Marcus met her gaze steadily. No, ma'am, it's not. Figured. Sister Margaret's program uses flip phones, not smartphones. She paused, studying his face in the dim street light. You're not really homeless, are you? The question hung in the rain-soaked air. Marcus weighed his options rapidly. Sarah Johnson was clearly more perceptive than her gentle manner suggested, and her protection of the homeless community made her both an asset and a liability. I am now, he said finally, which was true in ways that went beyond sleeping rough. Some circumstances you can't go back from. I understand something about that, she nodded slowly. The question is, are you dangerous to the people I protect? No, Marcus replied without hesitation. If anything, I want to help keep them safe. Then we'll leave it at that, for now. Sarah resumed pushing her cart, then stopped once more. Fair warning, though. Thompson's been getting worse lately, more aggressive, more targeted. Something's changed in the past month, and it's got the whole community on edge. As Sarah disappeared into the night, Marcus returned to his surveillance position. Thompson's patrol car was gone, but the warehouse activity had ceased. His cover was compromised, but not blown, a delicate distinction that could mean the difference between mission success and disaster. Marcus activated his phone and composed a carefully worded text to Admiral Mitchell. Local complications manageable. Timeline remains viable. Request background check on Detroit PD Officer D. Thompson, badge 2847. Possible corruption indicators. He sent the message and deleted it from his phone, then settled in for what remained of the night. Through his binoculars, he watched as a fourth SUV arrived at the warehouse. Another young woman was escorted inside, her movements showing the same drugged confusion as the first. Marcus Washington had spent his career hunting terrorists and enemy combatants across the globe. Now, in the ruins of Detroit, he was discovering that some of the worst predators wore badges and claimed to serve and protect. The mission parameters were clear: infiltrate and document Vincent the Broker Castellano's human trafficking operation. But after tonight's encounter with Thompson and Sarah's intervention, Marcus understood that the operation was more complex than headquarters had briefed. The rain continued to fall as Marcus began planning his next move. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new risks, and hopefully new opportunities to gather the evidence needed to bring down an operation that treated human beings as commodities. But tonight had also brought an unexpected development. He was no longer operating entirely alone. Whether that would prove to be an asset or a complication remained to be seen. The abandoned parking structure where Detroit's homeless community had established their unofficial encampment buzzed with quiet activity as dawn broke over the city. Marcus had arrived before sunrise, carrying a small bag of supplies from a nearby shelter, cover for his presence and genuine aid for people who needed it. Sarah Johnson sat on a milk crate near the entrance, sorting through donated clothing with the methodical efficiency of someone who had learned to make every resource count. She looked up as Marcus approached, her expression neutral but not unwelcoming. "Morning, Michael. Sleep okay?" Marcus nodded, maintaining his cover identity while genuinely appreciating her discretion. "Well enough. Brought some things from the shelter on Cass Avenue." "Tommy," Sarah called to a young man hunched over a small camp stove 20 feet away. "Come meet Michael. He's been staying in the area." Tommy Rodriguez looked up from the can of soup he was heating, his dark eyes automatically suspicious. At 19, he carried himself with the hyper-vigilant posture of someone who had learned that survival required constant awareness of threats. His clothes were too big for his thin frame, and old scars on his knuckles spoke of fights both won and lost. "You the guy Thompson was hassling last night?" Tommy asked, rising and approaching with the careful gait of a boxer. "Sarah told me about it." "That's right," Marcus replied, extending his hand. "Michael Washington." Tommy studied the offered hand before accepting it. Marcus noted Tommy's grip, strong, calloused, but also trembling slightly. Withdrawal symptoms, though from what substance Marcus couldn't determine. "Thompson's a piece of shit," Tommy said bluntly. "Been coming around more often lately, targeting anyone who looks at him wrong. Last week he beat the hell out of old Pete for asking about his missing daughter." Marcus's attention sharpened. "Someone's missing?" Sarah's expression darkened. 3 young women in the past month, all from the community, all vulnerable. She gestured toward the makeshift camp around them. Jessica Martinez, 19. Keisha Washington, no relation, 22. And 3 days ago, Lily Chen, just turned 18. The pattern was unmistakable to Marcus's trained eye, but he needed to gather information without revealing his expertise. "Did anyone report missing homeless girls to the police?" Tommy laughed bitterly. "Report missing homeless girls to cops who think we're all criminals anyway. Besides, word is Thompson himself was asking questions about Jessica right before she disappeared. Marcus felt the familiar weight of intelligence that demanded action. His surveillance had identified a trafficking operation, but he was only now understanding its local recruitment methods. The missing women weren't random victims. They were specifically targeted from a population that wouldn't be missed by mainstream society. "Maybe I can help look around," Marcus offered carefully. "I've got some experience finding people." Sarah studied his face intently. "What kind of experience would that be, Michael?" Before Marcus could answer, the sound of multiple vehicles approaching echoed through the parking structure. Tommy tensed immediately, his hand moving to a knife concealed in his jacket. "Cops," he whispered. 3 patrol cars entered the structure in formation, their occupants emerging with tactical precision that spoke of coordinated planning rather than routine patrol. Officer Thompson led the group, his swagger more pronounced with backup present. "Well, if it isn't my friend Michael, fancy meeting you here, and with the neighborhood's most prominent troublemaker, too." He gestured at Sarah with mock courtesy. "Ms. Johnson, I trust you've been keeping your nose clean since our last conversation." "We haven't broken any laws, Officer Thompson," Sarah replied with the calm dignity of someone accustomed to institutional harassment. "Laws are flexible things," Thompson replied. "Depends on interpretation. For instance, camping in public spaces, littering, possession of drug paraphernalia." His gaze shifted to Tommy. "Speaking of which, Mr. Rodriguez, you look like you might be holding something that doesn't belong to you." Tommy's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. Marcus noticed the young man's hands shake slightly. Whether from fear, anger, or withdrawal, the effect would be the same if Thompson decided to escalate. "Turn around, all of you. Hands on the wall." As the 3 complied, Marcus felt Thompson's hands conducting another unnecessarily aggressive search. This time, the officer focused on Marcus's jacket pockets, finding a small notepad that Marcus used to maintain his cover story. "What's this?" He flipped through pages of carefully crafted homeless services information, appointment reminders, and contact numbers. Hidden among the mundane entries were coded observations about warehouse activities, but the encryption was invisible without the proper key. "Appointments, phone numbers for services. Helps me remember things." Thompson studied several entries, his expression shifting from casual cruelty to genuine interest. One page contained a rough sketch of the warehouse district, ostensibly directions to a food bank, but detailed enough to show surveillance positions. "You spend a lot of time down by the docks, don't you, Michael?" The question carried implications that made Marcus's military instincts scream warnings. Thompson wasn't just a racist cop looking for targets. He was actively protecting something in that area. "Food banks down there. Sometimes work odd jobs loading trucks." Thompson pocketed the notepad. "I'll be keeping this. Evidence of vagrancy patterns. Maybe we can discuss your job opportunities in more detail later." As Thompson moved on to search Sarah, Marcus cataloged the officer's behavior. The notepad theft was too specific, too targeted. Thompson knew something about the warehouse activities, and Marcus's presence in the area had triggered protective responses. The search of Sarah yielded nothing significant, but Tommy's search produced a small bag of marijuana, barely enough for personal use, but sufficient for Thompson's purposes. "Well, well," Thompson said, holding up the bag with theatrical satisfaction. "Looks like we've got ourselves a drug dealer." "That's personal use. You know it is." Thompson's smile was wolfish. "I know what I see, which is distribution quantities in proximity to known trafficking routes. That's a felony, son." Marcus watched the interaction with growing concern. Thompson was manufacturing charges, but not randomly. The officer's focus on drug dealing near trafficking routes suggested knowledge of the broader operation. Sarah stepped forward, her voice carefully controlled. "Officer Thompson, that young man has been staying here for weeks. Everyone can verify he's not dealing anything to anyone. Is that right?" Thompson's attention shifted back to Sarah with renewed interest. "And how exactly would you know his activities, Miss Johnson? Been keeping detailed records of the community's business transactions?" The implication was clear and dangerous. Thompson was suggesting Sarah might be involved in drug distribution, a charge that would effectively end her advocacy work and remove a protective voice from the community. Marcus made a tactical decision. "Officer, I think you're making this more complicated than it needs to be." "Excuse me?" "The marijuana," Marcus said calmly. "It's for the shakes. Sometimes the memories get bad." Marcus let his hands tremble slightly. Not difficult, given the adrenaline coursing through his system. The performance tapped into stereotypes about damaged veterans while protecting both Tommy and Sarah from Thompson's escalation. PTSD, right? All you hero types come back broken, can't handle civilian life, turn to drugs and vagrancy. Marcus absorbed the insult without reaction, maintaining his character while Thompson decided how to proceed. After a long moment, the officer pocketed the marijuana. "Lucky for you, I'm feeling generous today. But Michael, this better be the last time I find you with controlled substances. Next time, you're looking at serious charges." As Thompson and his backup prepared to leave, he turned back to address the group. "Oh, and folks, this area is going to be getting increased attention from the city. Health department, building inspectors, the works. Might want to start thinking about alternative accommodations." The threat was clear. The homeless community was being targeted for displacement, and Thompson was coordinating the effort. As the patrol cars departed, Sarah immediately began organizing the group to discuss relocation options. Marcus pulled Tommy aside, keeping his voice low. "You okay?" Tommy studied Marcus with new respect and suspicion. "Why'd you do that? Take the heat for something that wasn't yours?" "Because you've got your whole life ahead of you. One marijuana charge might not seem like much, but it follows you. Makes everything harder." Marcus paused, then added, "Besides, around here we look out for each other. That's how we survive." The words echoed Sarah's from the previous night, and Tommy's expression shifted to something approaching trust. "You're not like other homeless guys. Way you handle Thompson, way you talk. You've had training." Marcus nodded carefully. "The military teaches you things. How to read situations, de-escalate problems. Sometimes those skills come in handy." "Could you teach me some of that stuff? The de-escalation thing?" The request caught Marcus off guard. His mission parameters didn't include training civilians in combat techniques, but Tommy's earnest desire to learn protective skills touched something in Marcus's paternal instincts. "Basic self-defense maybe, nothing fancy, just enough to stay safe." Over the following hour, as the community discussed relocation strategies, Marcus worked with Tommy on fundamental situational awareness and conflict avoidance. The young man was an eager student, his natural athleticism and quick intelligence making him a fast learner. Sarah watched their interaction with interest, occasionally asking questions that demonstrated her own tactical thinking. "Michael," she said during a quiet moment, "those de-escalation techniques of yours worked pretty well with Thompson. But I'm wondering, what happens when he decides talking isn't enough?" The question revealed the depth of Sarah's understanding. She recognized that Thompson's harassment was escalating and that conventional responses might not be sufficient. "Then we adapt, find ways to protect each other that don't give him excuses to escalate further." Sarah nodded, but Marcus could see her analytical mind working through scenarios. She was planning contingencies, preparing for possibilities that most people wouldn't consider. As the morning progressed, Marcus learned more about the community's structure and challenges. Sarah functioned as an unofficial leader and advocate, using her social work background to help people navigate services and bureaucracy. Tommy served as a scout and messenger, his youth and energy making him valuable for information gathering. Other community members filled supporting roles: lookouts, resource sharers, informal medics. What struck Marcus most was their interdependence. Despite their individual circumstances, they had created a functional social unit based on mutual aid and protection. It was, in many ways, similar to military unit cohesion, though born of desperation rather than training. The observation carried tactical implications. His mission focused on gathering intelligence about the trafficking operation, but the local recruitment pattern meant the homeless community was directly threatened. Any action he took would affect people who had already shown him kindness and protection. As afternoon approached, Marcus prepared to resume his surveillance activities. Tommy approached as he gathered his supplies. "You heading back toward the warehouse district?" Marcus nodded carefully. "Food bank opens at 2. Mind if I walk with you partway? Got some errands down that direction." The request set off alarm bells in Marcus's tactical assessment, but Tommy's expression was eager rather than suspicious. The young man was probably hoping for more informal training, not realizing the danger he might be walking into. "Might be boring. Lots of waiting in lines, filling out paperwork."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. I don't mind. Besides, Sarah says it's good to travel in pairs when Thompson's being extra aggressive. Marcus agreed reluctantly, recognizing that refusing might seem suspicious, while accepting would give him an opportunity to assess Tommy's skills and motivations. As they left the parking structure together, Marcus caught Sarah watching their departure with an expression that mixed hope and concern. The mission was becoming increasingly complex, but Marcus was beginning to understand that complexity might be necessary. The trafficking operation wasn't just a criminal enterprise, it was a predatory system that required community disruption to function effectively. Fighting it would require more than intelligence gathering and federal intervention. It would require protecting the people who had shown him humanity when he needed it most. Detective Lisa Chen sat in her unmarked sedan across from the parking structure that served as Detroit's largest homeless encampment, reviewing case files that painted a disturbing pattern. 3 missing persons reports in 6 weeks, all young women, all from the homeless community, all dismissed by her colleagues as runaways who'll turn up eventually. But Chen had spent 5 years working missing persons, and she recognized the signs of systematic predation. Jessica Martinez had been clean for 3 months and working toward her GED. Keisha Washington was saving money for cosmetology school. Lily Chen, no relation despite sharing a surname, had aged out of foster care but maintained contact with social services. These weren't impulsive departures. They were abductions. Chen's investigation had led her to the homeless community, where she discovered a level of organization and mutual protection that contradicted mainstream assumptions about street life. More importantly, she'd identified patterns in police response that suggested something beyond mere indifference. Her phone buzzed with a text from her partner. "Captain wants to see you, now." Chen drove to the precinct with growing unease. Captain Hernandez had been increasingly hostile toward Chen's missing persons investigations, particularly those involving homeless victims. The hostility had escalated since Chen began documenting connections between disappearances and specific patrol patterns. "Chen, close the door and sit down," Hernandez said without looking up from her computer. At 45, the captain projected professional competence, but Chen had begun to notice inconsistencies in her behavior. Late-night meetings with officers who had no business in her office, budget allocations that didn't match documented activities, and a particular interest in cases that should have been routine. "The missing persons cases you've been working, I'm reassigning them to Vice." "Captain, with respect, these cases don't fit Vice parameters. There's no evidence of prostitution or drug-related. The evidence suggests otherwise." Hernandez finally looked up, her expression carefully neutral. 3 young women with documented substance abuse histories disappear from areas known for drug trafficking. Vice has specialized experience with this population. Chen bit back her immediate response. The captain's characterization was inaccurate. Jessica had been clean for months, and Keisha had never had a substance problem. But arguing would only strengthen Hernandez's resolve. "I'd like to complete my current interviews before transferring the files. There are leads that might go cold if—" "The interviews stop now. In fact, I'm pulling you entirely from homeless community contact. We've received complaints about harassment." Harassment? Chen's professional composure cracked slightly. "Captain, I've been conducting standard investigative interviews. Everyone I've spoken with has been cooperative." Hernandez leaned back in her chair. Her calculating gaze suggested this conversation had been planned in advance. "Officer Thompson filed a report yesterday about a detective questioning witnesses without proper coordination with patrol units. Says you were interfering with ongoing investigations." Chen felt the pieces clicking into place. Thompson was involved somehow, and Hernandez was protecting him. The realization was both professionally devastating and personally dangerous. "I wasn't aware Thompson had ongoing investigations in that area." Drug interdiction, community policing initiatives, the kind of work that requires trust between officers and the community. Trust that gets damaged when detectives show up asking questions about missing drug addicts. The conversation was clearly over, but Chen made one final attempt. "Captain, what if these women aren't runaways? What if someone is specifically targeting homeless individuals because they know no one will look for them?" Hernandez's expression hardened. Then that someone would be counting on overenthusiastic detectives to disrupt investigations by asking the wrong questions to the wrong people.
Chen left the captain's office with the clear understanding that her career was in jeopardy. More disturbing was the realization that institutional resources were being actively used to suppress investigation of crimes against the city's most vulnerable population. Meanwhile, across the city, Marcus was conducting his own investigation. His surveillance of the warehouse district had identified a pattern of activity that suggested the trafficking operation was accelerating. More vehicles, more frequent deliveries, and increased security presence all pointed to something significant scheduled for the near future. He was photographing a license plate when his encrypted phone buzzed with another message from Admiral Mitchell. Congressional Oversight Committee asking questions about operation timeline. Need results or extraction recommendation within 48 hours. Marcus deleted the message and considered his options. Extraction would mean abandoning the investigation and leaving the trafficking operation intact. But staying meant increased risk of exposure, especially with local law enforcement actively hostile to anyone asking questions about missing women. His tactical decision was complicated by genuine concern for the people who had become his community. Sarah's protection, Tommy's eagerness to learn, and the solidarity of people who had nothing but still shared what they had. These relationships had become personally important in ways that went beyond operational considerations. Marcus was still processing the implications when Tommy approached, moving with the urgent energy that usually preceded trouble. "Michael, you need to see this," Tommy said quietly. "Police are setting up something big near the camp." Marcus followed Tommy to an observation point overlooking the parking structure. What he saw made his military instincts scream warnings. 6 patrol cars positioned in a coordinated pattern with additional units blocking access roads. This wasn't routine harassment, it was a tactical deployment. Sarah's trying to organize people to leave peacefully, but some of the older folks can't move quickly, and a few people are talking about standing their ground, Tommy continued. Marcus recognized the scenario immediately. The police deployment was designed to force confrontation, creating justification for arrests and community dispersal. But the timing was too coincidental. This was connected to the trafficking operation. "We need to get down there," Marcus said. "Help Sarah coordinate a safe evacuation." They reached the parking structure as the police operation began in earnest. Thompson led a team of 6 officers through the camp, conducting aggressive searches while civilian contractors followed behind, photographing personal belongings and shelter locations. Sarah stood near the center of the activity, her calm presence helping to keep tensions manageable while people gathered their possessions. But Marcus could see the strain in her posture. She understood this was more than routine harassment. "Everybody stay calm," Sarah called out. "Pack what you can carry and move toward the south exit. We'll regroup at the community center." Thompson approached Sarah with the swagger of someone backed by overwhelming force. "I'm afraid that's not going to work, Miss Johnson. We've received reports of drug distribution and weapons violations. Everyone stays put until we complete a thorough investigation."
"What reports?" Sarah asked, though Marcus could see she already knew the answer. Thompson smiled without warmth. "Anonymous tips from concerned citizens, very specific information about criminal activities in this location." Marcus realized what was happening. The police operation wasn't just harassing the homeless community, it was clearing potential witnesses to trafficking activities. The timing coincided with increased warehouse operations, suggesting coordination between law enforcement and criminal elements. As Thompson's team continued their searches, Marcus watched for an opportunity to document the operation without exposing himself. What he saw made his blood run cold. One of the officers, searching an elderly veteran's belongings, palmed a small package and then discovered it with theatrical surprise. The planted evidence was classic police corruption, but the execution was too smooth, too practiced. These officers had done this before. "Well, well," the officer announced loudly, "looks like we've got distribution quantities of methamphetamines hidden in a sleeping bag." The elderly veteran, a man Marcus knew to be clean and struggling with diabetes, protested as innocent with the desperate confusion of someone being framed. But his protests only provided Thompson with justification for escalation. "Resisting arrest," Thompson announced, despite the man's compliance. "Officer safety issue." Marcus watched Thompson draw his taser and something inside him snapped. Military training and moral conscience overrode operational security as he stepped forward. "Officer Thompson, that man has diabetes. If you tase him, you could cause cardiac arrest." Thompson spun toward Marcus, his expression shifting from professional cruelty to personal hatred. "Michael Washington, should have figured you'd be at the center of this." "He's not resisting," Marcus continued, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. "He's complying with instructions. There's no justification for force." Thompson's hand moved to his service weapon, a gesture that caused several other officers to tense. Marcus recognized the escalation pattern. Thompson was looking for an excuse to use lethal force. "You want to tell me how to do my job, vagrant?" Thompson asked, his voice carrying across the camp. "Maybe you'd like to discuss it downtown." Marcus had reached a decision point that would define everything that followed. He could maintain his cover, allow the framing to proceed, and preserve his mission. Or he could act on his moral convictions and accept the consequences. "I'm telling you that elderly man hasn't committed any crime," Marcus said clearly, "and everyone here knows it." Thompson drew his weapon, though he kept it lowered. "Threatening a police officer, that's a felony." "I haven't threatened anyone," Marcus replied, his hands visible and empty. "I've stated a fact. That man is innocent, and you know it." Sarah appeared at Marcus's side, her presence both supportive and terrifying. "Officer Thompson, there are witnesses here who will testify that Mr. Johnson has been clean for over a year. Everyone in this community can verify his character." Thompson's attention shifted between Marcus and Sarah, his tactical situation complicated by multiple witnesses with cameras. Several community members were recording the encounter, and Thompson was clearly aware that his actions were being documented. The standoff lasted 30 seconds that felt like hours. Then Thompson made his decision. "Everyone on the ground, now. This is now a crime scene investigation." The order triggered chaos. Some community members complied immediately, while others hesitated or tried to move away from the confrontation. In the confusion, Marcus saw Tommy moving toward the back of the crowd, his expression angry and determined. Marcus recognized the signs. Tommy was planning to intervene violently, a decision that would get him killed and accomplish nothing positive. Making a split-second tactical choice, Marcus moved to intercept Tommy while maintaining his cover. "Easy," Marcus said quietly, catching Tommy's arm. "This isn't the time." "They're framing people," Tommy hissed. "Just standing there watching them destroy our community?" "I know, but getting yourself shot won't help anyone." Tommy's muscles were coiled for action, his anger and protective instincts overriding tactical thinking. Marcus had seen the same response in young soldiers facing their first encounter with injustice, the desire to fight regardless of consequences. "Trust me," Marcus said, using the voice of command he'd developed leading teams in combat zones. "There's a better way to handle this." Tommy's eyes met Marcus's, and something in the older man's expression convinced him to stand down. But the moment of connection didn't go unnoticed by Thompson, who had been watching their interaction with growing suspicion. "Washington," Thompson called out, "step away from the others. You and I need to have a private conversation." Marcus realized his cover was blown beyond repair. Thompson's attention had focused on him specifically, and any hope of maintaining his homeless veteran persona was gone. The mission had reached a critical decision point. As Marcus walked toward Thompson, his mind raced through contingency plans. The trafficking operation was still active, but his ability to gather intelligence was compromised. The homeless community was under direct attack, and people he cared about were in immediate danger. But he had also gathered enough evidence to justify federal intervention, and his phone contained encrypted communications that could trigger Admiral Mitchell's backup plans. Thompson waited with predatory satisfaction, clearly believing he had cornered his target. What Thompson didn't know was that Marcus Washington had spent 25 years in situations where being cornered was just the beginning of the fight. The confrontation that had been building for days was about to begin in earnest. Captain Rita Hernandez stared at the surveillance photos spread across her desk, her expression cycling through recognition, calculation, and barely contained rage. The images, captured by Thompson's body camera during yesterday's confrontation, showed the homeless man known as Michael Washington displaying tactical awareness and command presence that no vagrant should possess. "Run it again," she ordered the tech analyst sitting across her desk. The facial recognition software processed the image for the third time, cross-referencing against military databases that required special authorization to access. The result appeared on screen. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Washington, Navy SEAL, decorated veteran with classified service history. "Son of a bitch," Hernandez muttered, reaching for her encrypted phone. The call connected after 2 rings. "We have a problem," she said without preamble. "Federal operator embedded in the homeless population, deep cover, military background. He's been watching the warehouse operations." Vincent Castellano's voice remained calm despite the implications. "How long?" "Unknown. Could be weeks, could be months. Thompson's been harassing him without realizing what he was dealing with." "Thompson's an idiot," Castellano replied, "but a useful one. Can he be trusted to handle this situation?" Hernandez considered the question. Thompson's racism and sadism made him reliable for intimidation work, but his lack of discipline had already compromised their operation. "He wants to hurt this guy personally. Might be better to let him." "No. Too much attention. Federal operators don't disappear without investigations. We need to be smarter." Meanwhile, across the city, Marcus was conducting his own damage assessment. The confrontation with Thompson had blown his cover beyond repair, but it had also provided critical intelligence about the scope of police corruption. The coordinated raid on the homeless camp wasn't random harassment, it was systematic witness elimination. His encrypted phone buzzed with a message from Admiral Mitchell. "Satellite intercepts indicate increased chatter about federal presence. Extraction window available in 6 hours." Marcus studied the message, weighing his options. Extraction would preserve his life and potentially his intelligence, but it would abandon the community that had protected him and leave the trafficking operation intact. The decision should have been simple: mission preservation over personal attachments. But Sarah's quiet dignity, Tommy's eager trust, and the solidarity of people who had nothing yet still shared what they had made the calculation more complex. These weren't just intelligence assets or collateral civilians, they had become family. Marcus deleted the message and typed a response. "Request 24-hour extension, critical intelligence pending." Detective Lisa Chen was having her own crisis of conscience. Barred from continuing her investigation, she had spent the morning reviewing her case files and discovering patterns that painted a disturbing picture. The missing women weren't random victims. They fit specific demographic profiles that suggested systematic selection. More troubling were the connections she identified between disappearances and police patrol schedules. Each missing person had been seen talking to Officer Thompson within 48 hours of vanishing. The pattern was too consistent to be coincidental. Chen made a decision that could end her career. She drove to the federal building downtown and requested a meeting with the FBI's Public Corruption Task Force. Special Agent Rebecca Torres listened to Chen's presentation with professional skepticism that gradually shifted to intense interest. The detective's documentation was thorough, her analysis sound, and her risk assessment chilling. "You understand what you're alleging? Systematic human trafficking with police protection at the departmental level?" Chen nodded. "I understand it sounds incredible, but the evidence supports the conclusion. Evidence that was gathered during an investigation your captain ordered you to discontinue." "Yes, ma'am. Evidence I'm bringing to federal authorities because local channels have been compromised." Torres studied Chen's file, noting her exemplary record and reputation for integrity. "What do you need from us?" "Protection for witnesses, investigation of the missing persons cases, and surveillance of the officers I've identified as suspects." That's a significant commitment of resources based on the word of one detective. Chen met Torres's gaze steadily. "Then don't take my word for it. Put Thompson under surveillance for 1 week. Document his activities, his contacts, his patrol patterns. The evidence will speak for itself." At the homeless encampment, Tommy was struggling with his own decisions. The police raid had scattered the community, forcing people into less secure locations throughout the city. Worse, word was spreading about increased police harassment targeting anyone who had been present during the confrontation. Tommy found Marcus at their agreed-upon meeting point, a 24-hour diner where the homeless weren't automatically ejected if they ordered coffee and minded their business. "Sarah's missing," Tommy said without preamble, as he slid into the booth across from Marcus. Marcus felt the words like a physical blow. "When?" "Last night. She was helping relocate some of the elderly folks to the shelter on Michigan Avenue. Never made it there. Her cart was found 3 blocks away, dumped behind a liquor store." The tactical implications were clear to Marcus. Sarah's disappearance wasn't random. It was targeted elimination of a community leader who could organize resistance or serve as a credible
witness. The trafficking operation was accelerating its timeline, which meant extraction or rescue attempts would happen soon. "Did anyone see what happened?" Marcus asked. Tommy's expression darkened. "Mrs. Patterson says she saw Thompson's patrol car in the area around the time Sarah went missing, but she's afraid to talk to anyone official about it." Marcus made a decision that abandoned any pretense of maintaining cover. "Tommy, I need you to listen carefully. I'm going to tell you something that could get us both killed if the wrong people find out." For the next 10 minutes, Marcus provided a carefully edited version of his background and mission. He explained about the trafficking operation, the police corruption, and his federal connections without revealing specific operational details that could compromise Tommy if he were captured. Tommy listened with growing amazement and anger. "You're saying Sarah was kidnapped because she was protecting people from human traffickers?" "I'm saying Sarah was kidnapped because she was effective at organizing community resistance to people who prefer their victims isolated and helpless." Tommy's hands clenched into fists on the table. "Then we get her back." Marcus recognized the dangerous combination of loyalty and inexperience that could get Tommy killed. "We get her back the right way, with backup, with planning, and with enough evidence to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." "How?" Marcus pulled out his phone and composed an encrypted message. "Flash priority. Community leader abducted. Pattern suggests trafficking escalation. Request immediate tactical support for rescue operation and evidence preservation." He sent the message and looked at Tommy. "We make the call that brings the cavalry." Vincent Castellano was reviewing transport schedules when his security chief delivered the news that changed everything. "Police intercepted federal communications. Military operator has called for backup." Castellano set down his coffee with deliberate calm. "Timeline. Unknown. Could be hours, could be days, but federal tactical teams are mobilizing." "Then we accelerate. Move all current inventory tonight. Torch the facilities and eliminate witnesses. Leave nothing for them to find."
What about the police assets? Castellano considered the question. Thompson and his corrupt colleagues had been useful, but they were also liabilities. Worse, they were loud, unpredictable liabilities who might try to cut deals if federal pressure mounted. Clean slate, he decided. Everyone who knows anything disappears. No loose ends, no witnesses, no evidence. The order would trigger a night of violence that would either eliminate all threats to the operation or expose it to federal intervention. Either way, the current phase was ending. At the FBI field office, Special Agent Torres was coordinating with multiple agencies as intelligence flowed in from sources that had been dormant for months. The homeless veteran who had contacted the Pentagon wasn't just a former SEAL. He was a decorated officer conducting a classified domestic counterterrorism operation. "How much backup does he need?" Torres asked her tactical coordinator. "Unknown. Local law enforcement is compromised at unknown levels. We have to assume hostile response to any federal presence." Torres made the call that would transform a covert intelligence operation into an active federal intervention. "Activate the Detroit Task Force, full tactical package, multiple agencies, and find me everything we have on this Vicente Castellano." As federal resources mobilized across the city, Marcus and Tommy waited in the diner for contact from Admiral Mitchell. The old soldier and the young street survivor made an unlikely team, but they shared something fundamental. Neither was willing to abandon family, regardless of the personal cost. The phone buzzed with an encrypted message. "Cavalry inbound. Hold position and prepare for contact. Help is coming." Marcus looked at Tommy and nodded toward the door. Time to go get Sarah back. But as they left the diner, neither man noticed the black sedan that had been watching them for the past hour, or the driver who was already reporting their location to people who had decided that sometimes the only way to win a war was to eliminate everyone who might testify about it. The abandoned warehouse on Detroit's east side had been converted into something that would haunt Marcus Washington's dreams for years to come. Hidden beneath loading dock facades and rusted industrial equipment, Vicente Castellano had created a processing center where human beings became commodities.
Marcus approached the perimeter with Tommy at his side, both men moving with the careful precision of hunters who understood they might also be prey. The surveillance had taken 3 hours, but Marcus now had a complete picture of the facility's security measures, guard rotations, and most importantly, the basement level where Sarah Johnson was being held. 12 guards, rotating every 4 hours, Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible over the wind coming off the Detroit River. Electronic surveillance on all approaches, but they're focused on vehicle traffic, not foot infiltration. Tommy studied the building through Marcus's binoculars, his young face hardened by anger and determination. Sarah's in the basement? Sub-level, along with at least 8 other women. Marcus had identified the holding area through thermal imaging equipment provided by Admiral Mitchell's advance team. "We're not just extracting Sarah, we're extracting everyone." Tommy's expression shifted from personal mission to something larger. "All of them?" "All of them," Marcus confirmed. "That's what Sarah would want." The rescue operation had been planned with military precision, but Marcus understood that no plan survived contact with the enemy unchanged. Variables included unknown numbers of victims, uncertain structural layout, and the possibility that local law enforcement would respond as hostiles rather than allies. Marcus's encrypted phone buzzed with a final coordination message from Admiral Mitchell. "Federal tactical teams in position. Local PD response neutralized through jurisdictional override. You have operational authority for victim extraction." Tommy read the tension in Marcus's posture. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's about to go exactly according to plan. I checked my concealed weapon, a military-issue sidearm provided by Mitchell's team. That's what worries me." The entry phase proceeded with textbook precision.
Marcus had identified a maintenance access tunnel that bypassed the main security perimeter, allowing them to reach the building's foundation without triggering electronic alarms. Tommy proved surprisingly adept at silent movement, his street skills translating well to tactical infiltration. They reached the basement level through a freight elevator shaft, using climbing techniques Marcus had learned during mountain warfare training. The descent took 12 minutes, but felt like hours as both men listened for signs of discovery. The basement was worse than Marcus had imagined. 24 holding cells arranged in neat rows, most occupied by women ranging in age from teenagers to middle-aged adults. The conditions were sanitary but clinical, designed for short-term processing rather than long-term imprisonment. Sarah Johnson occupied a cell near the center of the facility. At 62, she looked smaller than Marcus remembered, but her eyes held the same fierce intelligence that had protected Detroit's homeless community for years. "Michael." Sarah's voice was hoarse but amazed. "What are you doing here?" "Getting you out. All of you." Marcus worked on the electronic lock with equipment provided by federal technical specialists. The lock clicked open, and Sarah emerged with the careful movements of someone who had been assessing her situation for hours. "There are guards upstairs, at least 6 that I've seen. They're armed and professional. We know. Federal teams are handling the perimeter. Our job is to get everyone safely extracted." What followed was the most complex phase of the operation. 23 women in various states of physical and psychological trauma had to be moved through an industrial facility while avoiding detection by armed guards who wouldn't hesitate to use lethal force. Sarah proved invaluable as an organizer, using her social work experience to calm frightened victims while Marcus coordinated movement patterns. Tommy served as a scout, using his natural agility to check corridors and identify safe routes. The extraction proceeded smoothly until they reached the loading dock level. Marcus had expected to find federal agents controlling the area, but instead discovered Vicente Castellano himself waiting with 6 armed men. "Commander Marcus Washington, I've been looking forward to meeting you." Marcus pushed Sarah and Tommy behind a concrete pillar, his weapon drawn but tactically disadvantaged. "Let the women go, Castellano. Your problem is with me." Castellano laughed without humor. "My problem is with federal interference in a profitable business operation. The women are inventory. You are a liability. Both problems get solved tonight."
Kill them all. Castellano ordered his security team as he retreated toward a reinforced bunker position. No witnesses, no evidence, no problems. Marcus found himself in the firefight he had hoped to avoid. Federal agents were engaging Castellano's men, while Marcus tried to protect civilian victims who had no combat training or protective equipment. The tactical situation was manageable, but the human cost could be devastating. Tommy proved himself during the crisis. Moving with courage that surprised even Marcus, the young man helped evacuate frightened women while Marcus provided covering fire. Sarah coordinated the civilian movement with the calm efficiency of someone accustomed to crisis management. "Exit route secured," came Admiral Mitchell's voice through Marcus's earpiece. "Federal transport standing by for victim extraction." But Castellano had one final card to play. As federal agents closed in on his position, he activated what appeared to be a facility self-destruct mechanism. 5 minutes until thermal charges eliminate all evidence, his voice echoed through the building's communication system. "Enjoy your moral victory, Commander." Marcus realized the trafficking operation had been designed from the beginning as a disposal asset. If federal intervention became inevitable, Castellano would destroy everything rather than allow evidence to survive for prosecution. The evacuation timeline collapsed from manageable to desperate. 23 victims, plus Tommy and Sarah, had to be moved through a facility that would be destroyed in less than 5 minutes. Federal teams were still engaging hostile security forces, limiting their ability to assist with evacuation.
Marcus made the decision that would define his transition from covert operator to community protector. Tommy, get Sarah and the others to the federal extraction point. Move fast, don't look back. What about you? Tommy asked, though Marcus could see he already knew the answer. Someone has to make sure Castellano doesn't walk away from this. Sarah grabbed Marcus's arm with surprising strength. Michael, don't do this for revenge. Do it for justice. Marcus met her eyes and nodded. I'll see you outside. But as Tommy and Sarah led the victims toward federal extraction points, Marcus turned back toward Castellano's bunker position. The trafficking operation had destroyed dozens of lives, corrupted law enforcement, and turned human beings into commodities. Someone needed to be held accountable. The final confrontation between Marcus and Castellano would determine whether justice was possible in a system designed to protect predators who preyed on society's most vulnerable members. Special Agent Rebecca Torres coordinated the federal response from a mobile command center 3 blocks from the warehouse complex. Multiple agency resources had converged on Detroit within 6 hours of Marcus Washington's emergency contact, but the tactical situation was more complex than anyone had anticipated. Local PD responses mixed, Torres reported to Admiral Mitchell through encrypted communications. Detective Chen and approximately 12 officers are cooperating with federal authority. Captain Hernandez and 15 officers have gone silent. Officer Thompson is actively hostile. Mitchell's voice carried the weight of decades spent managing impossible situations. What's Washington's status? Inside the facility with civilian hostages, Castellano triggered some kind of destruction sequence. We have maybe 3 minutes before the building becomes inhabitable. The federal operation had been planned as a coordinated takedown of a trafficking network, but Castellano's scorched earth response was forcing improvisation under impossible time constraints. Torres had to choose between preserving evidence and preserving lives. Inside the warehouse, Marcus was discovering that Castellano had prepared for federal intervention more thoroughly than anyone had realized. The bunker position wasn't just defensive, it was a command center coordinating multiple operations across the city. Did you really think this was the only facility? Castellano taunted over the intercom system. Detroit has 6 processing centers. Philadelphia has 4. Chicago has 12. You found 1 operation out of dozens. Marcus realized the intelligence implications even as he worked to disable the thermal destruction charges. The trafficking network was much larger than federal agencies had estimated, which meant tonight's raid was just the beginning of a much longer campaign. Tommy and Sarah had successfully evacuated most of the victims, but 3 women remained trapped in the basement level. The facility's destruction sequence had activated security locks that required manual override from Castellano's position. Commander Washington, came Admiral Mitchell's voice through Marcus's earpiece. Federal teams are in position to breach the bunker, but we need those security codes.
Marcus had reached Castellano's command center, where he found the trafficking coordinator calmly destroying computer files while monitoring multiple video feeds of operations in other cities. "You're too late," Castellano said without looking up from his work. "Evidence destroyed, witnesses eliminated, operations relocated. This raid accomplished nothing except temporary disruption." Marcus studied the video monitors, recognizing locations in 3 different states. The trafficking network was more sophisticated than anyone had realized, with backup facilities and redundant command structures that would allow continued operations even after tonight's losses. "Give me the security codes for the basement level," Marcus demanded, his weapon trained on Castellano. "Or what? You'll shoot me?" Castellano smiled with genuine amusement. "Commander, you're a federal officer conducting a lawful operation. You can't execute prisoners, no matter how much they deserve it." The moral and tactical dilemma was exactly what Castellano had calculated. Marcus could disable the trafficking coordinator, but doing so might prevent rescue of the 3 remaining victims. Federal protocols demanded prisoner preservation for intelligence exploitation, but those same protocols might cost civilian lives.
Marcus made a decision that would haunt him professionally, but allow him to live with himself personally. He shot Castellano in the shoulder, disabling him without causing fatal injury. Security codes. Now! Castellano, surprised by Marcus's willingness to use non-lethal force, provided the access codes while cursing his miscalculation. The basement locks disengaged, allowing federal agents to extract the final 3 victims. Detective Lisa Chin was experiencing her own moment of moral reckoning 3 miles away. Captain Hernandez had ordered her to respond to the warehouse incident as backup for Officer Thompson. But Chen understood the real purpose was to eliminate a potential federal witness. Instead of complying, Chen had contacted Special Agent Torres directly and provided intelligence about police department corruption that went beyond trafficking protection. The evidence painted a picture of systematic criminal enterprise involving dozens of officers across multiple precincts. "How long has this been going on?" Torres asked during their meeting at federal headquarters. "Years, probably decades. But the trafficking connection is newer, maybe 18 months, coinciding with Castellano's expansion into the Detroit market." Torres studied the documentation Chen had provided, financial records, communication logs, patrol schedules that correlated with trafficking activities. The corruption was deeper and more organized than federal investigators had suspected. "What do you need from us?" Torres asked. "Protection for honest officers who want to testify, federal oversight of the department's internal investigation, and prosecution of everyone involved, regardless of rank or connections." The conversation was interrupted by emergency communications from the warehouse operation. Marcus had successfully extracted all victims and neutralized Castellano, but the trafficking coordinator's final revelation had expanded the investigation's scope dramatically. Officer Derek Thompson was having the worst night of his career in a patrol car 6 blocks from the warehouse. His radio communications with Captain Hernandez had been intercepted by federal monitoring equipment, providing prosecutors with recorded evidence of conspiracy to obstruct justice. Thompson understood his options were limited. Federal agencies were mobilizing resources that would expose every corrupt officer in the department. He could cooperate and hope for leniency, or he could run and hope to disappear before arrest warrants were issued. He chose a third option that reflected both his cowardice and his hatred. Thompson drove to the community center where Sarah Johnson had relocated the homeless population after the police raid. If he couldn't escape federal justice, he would at least eliminate the witnesses whose testimony had triggered the investigation. Tommy Rodriguez was helping distribute blankets when Thompson's patrol car pulled up outside the community center. The young man had returned from the warehouse operation, transformed by the experience of participating in a successful rescue mission, but he hadn't lost his street instincts. "Everyone get inside and away from windows," Tommy called out, recognizing the tactical situation immediately. "Someone call 911. Thompson entered the community center with his service weapon drawn, his behavior clearly indicating he had abandoned any pretense of lawful police work. The 15 homeless individuals present included several who had witnessed his harassment and evidence planting during previous encounters. "Time for a final community meeting," Thompson announced, his voice carrying the particular edge of someone who had decided violence was his only remaining option. Tommy positioned himself between Thompson and the elderly residents, drawing on lessons Marcus had taught him about de-escalation and tactical positioning. "Officer Thompson, these people haven't committed any crimes. Whatever problem you have, it's not with them."
Thompson's laugh was harsh and desperate. "My problem is with federal investigators who think homeless drug addicts make reliable witnesses against police officers." The situation was escalating toward mass violence when Marcus Washington arrived with federal backup. The warehouse operation had concluded successfully, but Marcus had realized that Castellano's network included elimination protocols for potential witnesses. "Thompson, drop your weapon," Marcus commanded from the doorway, flanked by 2 FBI agents. "It's over. Castellano's in custody, your communications have been monitored, and federal prosecutors have enough evidence to convict you 10 times over."
Thompson spun toward Marcus, his weapon shifting between targets in a pattern that indicated complete tactical breakdown. "You did this. Destroyed my career, my life, everything." Marcus recognized the psychology of someone who had lost all perspective on consequences. "Your career was built on corruption and violence. I just documented what you were already doing." The standoff ended when Thompson made the mistake of threatening Tommy directly. Marcus's response was swift and precise, a single shot that disarmed Thompson without causing fatal injury. Federal agents immediately secured the scene and began processing Thompson for booking. As emergency medical personnel treated Thompson's wound, Special Agent Torres approached Marcus. The operation was successful. All victims extracted safely, Castellano in custody, evidence preserved. But his intelligence about other facilities means this investigation is just beginning. Marcus looked around the community center at the people who had become his family. Sarah Johnson was coordinating with social services to provide trauma counseling for the rescued victims. Tommy was helping elderly residents process the night's events while maintaining his protective stance. "What happens next?" Marcus asked Torres. "Prosecutions, reforms, and a lot of work cleaning up institutions that allowed this to happen." Torres paused, studying Marcus's expression. "Admiral Mitchell mentioned you might be interested in continuing this work in a different capacity." Marcus understood the offer: federal law enforcement career, resources to combat trafficking networks, and opportunity to transform his military skills into civilian justice work. It was everything he should want after years of drifting between missions and personal guilt. But as he watched Sarah Johnson organize community recovery efforts and Tommy mature into a protective leader, Marcus realized his calling wasn't about federal authority or institutional resources. It was about standing with people who needed protection and couldn't get it through conventional channels. "I think I'll stay here, help rebuild what got broken tonight." Torres nodded with understanding that suggested she had hoped for that answer. "Federal support will be available when you need it. This community has earned that much." As dawn broke over Detroit, Marcus Washington stood outside the community center, watching a city begin the long process of healing from systematic corruption and violence. The trafficking network would take years to fully dismantle, and police reform would require sustained political pressure. But tonight, 23 women had been freed from slavery. Corrupt officers were facing justice, and a community that had been ignored and abused was finally being heard by people with the power to create change. It was, Marcus thought, exactly the kind of mission worth dedicating a life to. 3 weeks after the warehouse raid, Marcus Washington understood that winning one battle had only revealed the scope of the war. Federal investigators had uncovered trafficking networks in 17 cities, but Vincent Castellano's arrest had triggered a violent response from partners who preferred dead witnesses to federal prosecutions. Captain Rita Hernandez sat in her patrol car outside the community center at 3 a.m., watching homeless individuals sleep in doorways and alleys. Her gambling debts had made corruption seem like a reasonable choice 18 months ago. Now, with federal agents monitoring her every move, she faced a simple calculation: eliminate the witnesses who could testify about police protection of trafficking operations, or spend the next 20 years in federal prison. Hernandez had brought 12 officers, all facing corruption charges that would end their careers and freedom. Desperate people made dangerous enemies, and Marcus had underestimated their willingness to commit mass murder to avoid prosecution. "All units, we have reports of armed terrorists in the community center," Hernandez announced over police radio, knowing federal monitors would record the lie. "Use all necessary force to neutralize threats to public safety." The attack began with coordinated entry through 4 access points. Marcus arrived as the first shots were fired, his federal backup still 7 minutes away. Inside, Tommy was leading 14 community members toward the secure room, while Sarah Johnson helped an elderly veteran who couldn't move quickly. Marcus entered through a maintenance access he had prepared for exactly this scenario. His military training took over as he assessed threats, civilian positions, and tactical opportunities. 12 armed officers against 1 federal agent and 15 unarmed civilians represented impossible odds, but Marcus had faced impossible odds before. "Tommy, status report," Marcus whispered into his radio. 12 people secure, Sarah and Mr. Patterson still moving toward the safe room. Officers are between them and safety. Marcus made his decision. Moving with the silent precision that had made him legendary among SEAL teams, he began systematically disabling the attacking officers. Non-lethal techniques when possible, lethal force when necessary to protect innocent lives. The first officer went down to a chokehold that left him unconscious but breathing. The second fell to a precise strike that shattered his weapon and dislocated his shoulder. Marcus was working his way toward Sarah and Mr. Patterson when Hernandez spotted him. "Marcus Washington," she called out, using his real name to identify him to her remaining officers. "Federal terrorist, shoot on sight." The announcement transformed the tactical situation from rescue operation to survival scenario. Marcus found himself pinned behind concrete pillars while officers with automatic weapons tried to kill him and the civilians he was protecting. Tommy's voice crackled over the radio. "Marcus, I can create a distraction. Draw them away from Sarah." "Negative. Stay in the secure room. She's going to die if someone doesn't help her." Marcus realized Tommy was right. Sarah and Mr. Patterson were trapped in open space between Marcus's position and the safe room. Federal backup was still 4 minutes away, and Hernandez was coordinating her officers for a final assault. "Tommy, listen carefully. I'm going to create an opportunity for you to reach Sarah. When I give the signal, move fast and don't look back." Marcus activated an emergency beacon that would bring every federal agent in Detroit to his location, then stepped into open space where Hernandez could see him clearly. "Captain Hernandez, you're surrounded by federal agents. Surrender now and you might live to see trial." The lie bought Tommy 30 seconds to reach Sarah and Mr. Patterson. It also focused every hostile weapon on Marcus's position, turning him into a target for officers who understood their only hope of avoiding prison was eliminating all witnesses. Admiral James Mitchell arrived in Detroit with resources that transformed the community center siege from local crisis to federal priority operation. 24 federal agents, tactical helicopter support, and negotiation specialists surrounded the building where 12 corrupt officers were attempting to murder witnesses to their crimes. Inside, Marcus was running low on ammunition and options. He had successfully protected the civilians, but Hernandez's officers were willing to die rather than face prosecution for their crimes. The tactical situation required federal intervention before desperation turned to mass casualty events. "Marcus, this is Mitchell. Federal teams are in position for coordinated entry. Can you maintain position for 3 more minutes?" Marcus assessed his situation: limited ammunition, multiple hostile contacts, and 15 civilians depending on his protection. 3 minutes might as well be 3 hours. "Affirmative, Admiral. But these officers aren't looking for surrender options." Mitchell understood the implications. Corrupt police willing to commit mass murder represented a unique tactical challenge that required precise coordination between federal agents who needed evidence and a SEAL commander who needed to keep people alive. The federal assault began with flashbang grenades that disoriented the attacking officers, while Marcus used the distraction to reach Sarah and Tommy's position. What followed was a textbook federal operation that demonstrated why Admiral Mitchell had earned his reputation during 30 decades of impossible missions. Federal agents entered from 6 access points simultaneously, using non-lethal weapons when possible, but responding with deadly force when officers refused surrender commands. The coordination was flawless, but the human cost was significant. Captain Hernandez made a final, desperate attempt to eliminate Marcus personally, charging his position with a weapon in each hand and murder in her eyes. Marcus had no choice but to respond with lethal force, ending Hernandez's corruption permanently, while preserving the lives of people who had shown him kindness when he needed it most. Tommy Rodriguez emerged from the secure room to find a community center transformed into a crime scene, with federal agents processing evidence while paramedics treated wounded officers. The young man had witnessed violence before, but never violence committed to protect him and his community. "Is it over?" Tommy asked Marcus as federal agents secured the scene. Marcus looked around at the damage and the cost of justice. "This part is over. The larger fight continues." Detective Lisa Chan arrived with federal prosecutors who would need her testimony to convict the surviving corrupt officers. Her decision to cooperate with federal authorities had made her a target, but it had also made her the key witness in prosecutions that would transform policing in Detroit. "How many officers were involved?" Chen asked Special Agent Torres. 47 officers across 6 precincts. The corruption was deeper than anyone realized. Chen felt the weight of institutional betrayal and personal responsibility. Her fellow officers had committed crimes against the people they were sworn to protect, and she had been the one to expose them. Sarah Johnson worked with Federal Victim Services to ensure trauma counseling for community members who had survived the attack. Her social work background made her invaluable in helping people process violence that would have lasting psychological effects. Admiral Mitchell found Marcus outside the community center, watching federal agents document evidence that would support dozens of prosecutions. "Hell of a job, Commander. The Pentagon is prepared to offer you any assignment you want, your choice of teams, operations, or training positions." Marcus considered the offer that would restore his military career and provide opportunities for service around the world. It was everything he should want after years of drifting between missions and personal guilt. "Thank you, Admiral, but I think I'm needed here." Mitchell nodded with understanding that suggested he had hoped for that answer. "Federal resources will remain available. This community has earned our support." As federal agents completed their investigation, Marcus realized the trafficking network's defeat had required more than military tactics or federal resources. It had required a community willing to protect each other and individuals willing to sacrifice personal safety for collective justice. 6 months after the community center siege, Detroit was discovering what justice looked like when federal resources combined with community organizing. 47 police officers faced federal charges ranging from corruption to attempted murder. The trafficking network that had operated with police protection was systematically dismantled across multiple states. Marcus Washington stood in federal court as prosecutors presented evidence that would send Vincent Castellano to prison for the rest of his life. The trafficking coordinator had attempted to negotiate by providing information about other networks, but federal judges were unimpressed by cooperation offered only after capture. The defendant treated human beings as commodities, Judge Patricia Williams stated during sentencing. His operation caused immeasurable suffering to victims and communities. The sentence is life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Outside the courthouse, Sarah Johnson organized a press conference that highlighted ongoing needs in Detroit's homeless community. Federal attention had brought resources, but sustainable change required continued political pressure and community organizing. Tonight, families can sleep safely because people like Marcus Washington refuse to ignore injustice. But our work isn't finished. Systemic problems require systematic solutions. Tommy Rodriguez had enrolled in community college while maintaining his role as a community organizer. The young man, who had aged out of foster care with anger issues, had become an advocate for youth aging out of state care. His transformation demonstrated the potential that existed when people received support instead of criminalization. Detective Lisa Chen headed Detroit's new Police Accountability Unit, working with federal oversight to implement reforms that would prevent future corruption. Her willingness to expose police crimes had initially isolated her from fellow officers, but federal backing had made her untouchable. The prosecutions were successful, but they also revealed the scope of institutional failure that had allowed trafficking to flourish. Police departments in 12 cities faced federal oversight. Child services agencies underwent complete restructuring. Political officials who had enabled corruption through willful ignorance faced their own investigations.
Admiral Mitchell visited Detroit to present Marcus with commendations that recognized his service during the trafficking investigation. The ceremony took place at the community center, with homeless individuals and federal officials gathering to honor a man who had risked everything to protect people society had abandoned. Marcus Washington represents the best of military service, Mitchell said. He used his skills not for personal glory, but to protect those who needed protection most. Marcus accepted the honors on behalf of the community that had protected him when he needed protection. His individual actions had been important, but collective action had made justice possible. The trafficking network's defeat had saved hundreds of lives and exposed systematic corruption, but Marcus understood that other networks would emerge unless communities remained vigilant. His mission had evolved from military operation to lifelong commitment to justice. As evening fell over Detroit, Marcus walked through streets where homeless individuals could sleep without fearing police harassment or trafficking recruitment. The transformation wasn't complete, but it was real and sustainable. Sarah joined him for their daily security rounds, checking on community members and assessing ongoing needs. "Any regrets about staying?" she asked. Marcus looked around at a city slowly healing from decades of neglect and corruption. "None at all. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be." The story of Marcus Washington had become the story of a community that refused to be ignored and institutions that learned to serve rather than exploit those who needed help most. 18 months after the trafficking network's collapse, Marcus Washington stood before a congressional subcommittee explaining how military veterans could serve communities through civilian protection programs. The former Navy SEAL commander wore a suit instead of uniform, but his bearing remained unmistakably military. "Community defense isn't about vigilantism," Marcus testified. "It's about training vulnerable populations to protect themselves while connecting them with legitimate resources and support systems." The Detroit Community Protection Program had become a model for cities nationwide. Veterans with combat experience provided security training, while social workers addressed underlying causes of vulnerability. The program had reduced street crime by 40%, while increasing homeless services utilization by 300%. Sarah Johnson sat in the gallery, now director of the Great Lakes Regional Housing Coalition. Her advocacy work had evolved from local organizing to policy development that influenced federal legislation. The woman who had once pushed a shopping cart through abandoned parking structures now testified regularly before Congress about housing inequality. Tommy Rodriguez completed his bachelor's degree while running youth programs that help foster care alumni avoid homelessness. The young man who had aged out of state care with anger issues was pursuing a master's degree in social work. His transformation demonstrated the potential that existed when people received support instead of criminalization. Detective Lisa Chen had been promoted to captain of Detroit's Reformed Community Relations Division. Her unit served as a model for police departments nationwide, emphasizing community partnership over enforcement. The approach required more resources but produced better outcomes for both officers and residents. After his testimony, Marcus returned to Detroit and the converted warehouse that now housed the Community Protection Program. The facility included training spaces, transitional housing, and administrative offices for coordinating with federal and local agencies. Admiral Mitchell visited monthly, officially to monitor federal grant compliance, but actually to check on his former officers' well-being.
"Any regrets about leaving military service?" he asked during their latest meeting. Marcus looked around at the bustling activity. Veterans teaching self-defense classes, social workers conducting intake interviews, Tommy leading a group discussion about employment resources. "None at all, Admiral. This is military service, just in a different uniform." The trafficking investigation had revealed networks operating in 43 cities, leading to prosecutions that dismantled criminal organizations while exposing institutional failures that had enabled their operations. Police departments underwent federal oversight, social services agencies implemented new accountability measures, and political officials faced consequences for willful ignorance. But Marcus understood that individual prosecutions couldn't address systemic problems that created vulnerability. Real change required communities that protected their most vulnerable members, while institutions served rather than exploit those who needed help most. Sarah joined Marcus for their evening security rounds, a ritual that had evolved from survival necessity to community building. They walked through neighborhoods where homeless individuals could sleep safely, where young people had alternatives to dangerous survival strategies, where police served as protectors rather than predators. "New case came in today," Sarah mentioned. "Possible trafficking network in Cleveland. Federal task force is requesting consultation." Marcus nodded, understanding the implication. The skills he had developed in Detroit were needed elsewhere, but the community they had built required continued commitment and protection. "Tommy can handle operations here for a few days," Marcus decided. "Cleveland deserves the same chance Detroit got." As they completed their rounds, Marcus reflected on the transformation that had occurred in his life, in the community, and in his understanding of service. Military training had prepared him for combat, but Detroit had taught him that the most important battles were fought not against foreign enemies, but for domestic justice. The mission continued, one community at a time, one life at a time, one person willing to stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. Marcus Washington had found his calling, and it would last a lifetime. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.